This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, welcome to CTC. I'm Lloyd Patterson. Gangs are a well-known phenomenon in big cities. Their existence in Miami, Atlanta, Los Angeles is no secret. But what about here in this corner of Northwest Florida? Our guests are about to fill us in. Sheriff David Morgan came into office elected in 2008. He's the top law enforcement officer in Escambia County. He has more than 30 years of law enforcement experience. Sergeant Rick Vinson supervises the gang unit task force for Escambia Sheriff Morgan. He's a former paramedic who now has more than 10 years in law enforcement. Jeff Gaddy is in the office of State Attorney Bill Edens, received his law degree about 3 years ago and went to work as a prosecutor, starting out in misdemeanors before moving to felonies, and now the gang and gun prosecutor for Mr. Edens. And Reggie Dogan is a longtime columnist for the Pensacola News Journal, where he shares his observations about life in Northwest Florida. And he recently wrote that gangs really are here and active in Escambia County. And we welcome you all to the program tonight. It's a serious subject. Gangs, I know there was some skepticism when it was first reported that gangs, how could gangs be here? Why would they bother here? This isn't that big of a place. Sheriff, they're for real. Yes or no?
Yes, sir. Really noticed the emergence of gangs back on the campaign trail. Of course, when you're campaigning for public office, you're all over the county in all four corners. And during that time, noticed a lot of gang graffiti, which is called tagging, where the gangs will use their gang symbols and they'll paint the sides of buildings or overpasses and underpasses. We noticed the gang graffiti during the campaign, and I've made this statement throughout the county in many different venues. The only thing I've really been surprised about in my first year in office is the breadth and depth of the gang activity in Escambia County. We're identifying, more and more gangs, unfortunately. We're up to about 13 that are very active. We think it could be as high as 17 actual identified gangs, some with national affiliations, some which are called local gangs or hybrid gangs here in Escambia County. Very active. We mirror the national average as far as the sale of drugs and violent crime, which is about 80% gang related, and that's the averages we're running here in Escambia County according to our statisticians.
Sergeant Vinson, you run the gang unit for Sheriff Morgan. What kind of crimes are you seeing these gangs commit?
We're seeing the same type of crimes here in Escambia County from our gangs that we see nationwide. The type of crimes they commit is no different than your national gangs, such as the Bloods and Crips. We're seeing home invasions. We're able to tie robberies back to these individuals. Most definitely street-level narcotic sales, which is their bread and butter here in Escambia County. In addition, some of the homicides that have been committed over the last year, we can probably say are at least gang-related.
Jeff Gaddy, you're the prosecutor that handles these cases. Is it getting to be a bigger issue in your office?
It certainly is. It's something that we really take seriously. When you start seeing the same names and same groups of people committing these types of crimes, you really see the patterns, and you see that we really do have gang issues. There are a lot of problems with that, and we are taking those very seriously. All those cases are, we take a hard line on them. We don't plea bargain those cases unless there's a really good reason to, and all those cases are looked at by supervisors.
All right, and Reggie Dogan, the News Journal columnist, what does it say about an area or a community when it starts seeing gang activity like we're seeing here?
I would say that it reflects the nationwide communities. Gangs have always been with us and around us. In this community, I think it's been two schools of thought. There's been one side that says this gang talk is really much ado about nothing, and the other side would come in and saying that the gangs are really flourishing in the community. I think I fall somewhere in the middle of that belief. I don't know if the gangs are as organized and structured as the big gangs in California. The Bloods and Crips are the gangs they had in Chicago years ago, like they think called the Blackstone Rangers and the El Rukins. But these are more neighborhood kind of gangs. And according to the state law, all it takes to be in a gang is to have 3 members that wear the same colors, that flash signs and those kind of things. So it may be even more than what the sheriff is talking about. But what brought my attention to the gangs was not just the article we ran in the paper, but on that Friday before the article, there was a big story on the History Channel about a gang in Columbia, South Carolina, which is I'm from South Carolina, and this gang was really terrorizing the city, and that made me think, well, if this gang could grow from a small neighborhood gang to what they consider a national gang, then that could probably happen here in Escambia County too.
All right, is that the fear that we should be having now, do you think, officers, that they may be small, maybe small time now, but give them a little more time?
Well, Mr. Dogan's assessment is correct, and we're sending Sergeant Vinson and his gang task force folks around the state to garner more training for the gangs, because again, we're here just starting to get our arms around this. But I think I heard a very sage statement from a LAPD sergeant when I was out in California. Used to ride some and work some with the Los Angeles Police Department out there, and we were all at dinner one night having a hamburger at one of the local burger joints, and a couple of younger officers getting in an argument about a recent shooting. And they wanted to throw out whether they really weren't a part of La Familia or MS-13 or some, again, nationally known gang that had some sort of tie that would make you sit up and take notice. No Bloods or Crips, those sorts of things. And I remember the sergeant took a bite out of his hamburger and put it down and swallowed and looked at these 2 young officers and said, "You need to get a grip." He said, "Dead is dead." He said, if you're shot by a wannabe gang member or one that we can affiliate with a gang, dead is dead. And what we're dealing with now, unfortunately, is a much more dangerous hybrid gang. And I'll defer this to Sergeant Vinson, because he just completed the training. And as I recall, Rick, in your training, they said this sort of gang membership is actually more dangerous than those that are organized.
Okay,
Yeah.
what makes it more dangerous?
Well, you're looking at the larger gangs such as the Bloods and Crips. Again, there is an organization there. There are rules that they abide by. Your local hybrid gangs, their rule is make money. One of their mottos is get money. That's what they're looking for, and by any means necessary. There are really no rules for these folks. And that hybridization and that lack of control, if I go out today and I'm in a hybrid gang and I decided to commit a crime, I have nobody to tell me, no, you're not going to do that. You're not going to bring that unwanted attention to our group. And that's what's happening here locally.
And some of your shootings are crossovers because, again, there are no territories. So therefore, if I'm from one of the local hybrid groups and I cross town or cross the county and sell drugs or commit a crime in another part of the county, then the gang war's on. Where again, with the more organized, structured gangs, again, there, as odd as it may sound, there is a set of rules by having that affiliation. We don't have those rules here.
Is it your contention that these crimes that are committed by gangs are crimes that would not be committed otherwise if these gangs did not exist? Because it seems like in some communities the crime rate's always been quite high and it's been somewhat dangerous to be around.
I think if you go back and look at that community, maybe look behind the scenes, it may be that they have a gang problem there. Some of these individuals would not have the guts to commit the crimes that they commit if they did not have the members behind them to back them up. They're not going to go across town to do a drive-by shooting if they realize that if that other group comes back at them, they've got no support. They're not going to do it. So the gang mentality flourishes here, and that's what drives some of this criminal activity. One thing that Mr. Dogan mentioned a few minutes ago is the gang statute says that all you have to do to be a gang or a gang member is, just to throw up hand signs and have the colors and those type things. But one thing you left out is, part of that is you must commit criminal activity. Part of what you're doing must be you're committing criminal activity in our community.
Okay, well, you brought that up, and I'll get to you guys in just a second, but we do have a graphic I want to show you what the Florida gang law is, and this is, you have to have a couple of these things before you're considered part of a gang. Now that's what a gang is, a formal or informal organization with 3+ members, common name, etc. But the next graphic is what I want to get into. How do you know somebody's in a gang? Well, they admit they're in a membership. They're identified by a parent or a guardian. They adopt the gang dress code, if you could call it that. They use the gang hand sign or tattoos. They associate with gang members. They have been ID'd by an informant, ID'd by physical evidence, seen in the company of a gang, or claim part of a gang crime. Now, you take any two of those, as I understand it, and you are officially, if you want to call it that, part of a gang. Jeff Gaddy, and that's where you come in and you start taking a harder look at what they're doing.
Absolutely. What we've done with the help of law enforcement is developed a list of people in Escambia County that we can identify as gang members by the statute, meaning that they meet at least two of those criteria. We have a list of anywhere from 120 to 140 individuals that we have documented evidence that we can prove that they are gang members, and those are the people that we're taking a hard line with, and those are the folks that we're really concentrating on those cases and make sure that they get the special attention that they have shown that they deserve.
Reggie Dogan, I'm sure you've heard people, they interview old prison guards and they'll say that the prisoners have really changed over the years. They used to be guys come in, they do their time, they didn't cause much trouble. They say that the younger guys that are going to prison today are much more violent and desperate. What do you think has gone on in our society that produces this absolute carelessness about other human beings?
There's a sense of hopelessness, nihilism that's evading our young people, particularly our young African Americans. There are no jobs. They've been miseducated, been mistreated. They feel that there is nothing for them to do in the community. They have nowhere to go. I talk to them on occasion. I say, well, you know, if you sell drugs, you may go to jail. They say, what could be worse than what I have in my life right now? I think what we need to do is look at some kind of way to find programs to keep these kids involved in activities like sports and the Boys and Girls Clubs and the Big Brothers and Big Sisters. We have to find a way to keep them out of the system, out of the juvenile justice system before they go to prison and all those things, and that way we can avert some of these gang problems. They say people join gangs to make money. That's probably one of the reasons, but a lot of them join gangs for security. As he said, they like to have their friends around them for protection. They join gangs for a sense of belonging, for the same reason the kids join the Boy Scouts or fraternities. They want to belong to something. They have no family structure. The teachers don't care about them in school, they think, and they don't get an education, and the only resort they see is selling drugs and joining gangs.
This human need to belong to something, to identify with something bigger, is really quite a powerful draw, isn't it?
William James, a psychologist, 19th century psychologist, said one of the deepest needs in humans is to be appreciated. These kids are looking for appreciation. Another thing that the sergeant said is that they are very disciplined. Kids want discipline. They want it from their families. They want it from their parents, from their schools. They don't get it there. They'll go to the gangs, and gangs have discipline. They have rules that you abide by. If they can abide by those rules, they can abide by our rules, but nobody is training these kids or teaching these kids. It's kind of like, as I said, they're social and psychological criminal misfits.
Mm-hmm. Sheriff, Sergeant, as you drive around the community, I know your job is your job's law enforcement. You're not supposed to be, your job isn't to figure out why people commit crimes, it's just to make the arrest, but it has to affect you as a leader in the community. Do you wonder what's going on that kids do this?
Well, what frustrates me is being in the executive position at the sheriff's office is the problem-solving aspect, because my folks will tell you that there's certain phrases that I love, and one is working the right end of the problem, because I can work the wrong end of the problem until the end of time.
And you feel like you're working the wrong end of the problem.
Until the second coming of Christ, and I won't accomplish anything. And so what Mr. Dogan said again is true. What we're trying to overcome here, the basic premise is poor parenting. And how do we overcome poor parenting? Now, I think we have a sufficient number of programs, but it's getting these children plugged into some of these programs and a consistent application of that. And again, on the law enforcement side, what is frustrating is I tell folks, we will see them, but the intervention programs that we have, we do work a lot of crime prevention. We do a lot of public service announcements. We've got the programs in the schools where we teach kids about gangs, gang activity, or we're reaching out now to the school system. We'll be going to all the PTA meetings, and Sergeant Vinson and his folks have got a gang presentation. We're even partnering with Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart wants to get involved. The economic impact on our community is tremendous. Sacred Heart sometimes will have 2 lockdowns a day because they'll have a gang member come in that's either been shot or stabbed, and the threats will come in on the telephone, and they have to lock down the hospital. And so that affects, again, them economically. So the violence level here is certainly ramped up. But again, my frustrating thing is I'm not sure how you overcome poor parenting. And that's really, when you get back to these basic issues, that's what it is.
Sergeant Vinson, when you see kids that are part of a gang, how often do they have two parents at home that are working and part of the community and going to church and involved in the schools?
Well, most of the time when I see them, they're in the street anyway, so I don't see any of their home life. But we do understand through our training and education that majority of the ones that we see are at least a one-parent family, and that parent is usually working. I think we took this from your article earlier, that they work the night shift and are rarely at home to provide the guidance that they need. And so that's what we're seeing. We're all seeing the same thing. It's just we're having to approach it. I hate to say it, on law enforcement side, our job is a little bit more easy than when you start talking to the individuals like Mr. Dogan over here, because to address the socioeconomic problems is a much broader problem than what we have to deal with law enforcement. We see a crime committed, we address that issue. Our job is much more simpler than theirs.
It becomes vastly more complex, doesn't it, when you start bringing in the social dynamics?
Sure. Fortunately, myself, I came from two-parent household. My father was a deacon in the church. My mother was involved in the church, and they both had jobs. And they made sure that I went to school and got an education. But I could have just as well strayed away too, because there are some two-parent families where kids do get in gangs. I'm gonna give you an example of something happened when I was a child. I wouldn't say we were a gang, but a bunch of guys, 10, 15 years old, about 10 of us, walked through a cemetery one night. And we walked through the cemetery. Of course, we were afraid. We didn't touch anything. But we got home and we went at the kitchen table. We were talking with my parents. We were joking about going through the cemetery. And my father never looked up. He said that if something happens in that cemetery, if something is broken or vandalized, they're going to come looking for you guys. And he said that I don't ever want to hear of you being in a cemetery unless you're going to your funeral or someone else's funeral. And that stuck with me. I never went to another cemetery unless it was a funeral. And that's the kind of thing you need. And my father was not the kind of father who believed in corporal punishment, but just the threat of him saying that. And that's the kind of thing you need. You need parents, you need role models, you need mentors. Somebody has to take up with these young people. Otherwise, we're going to continue to lose them, a generation of kids to violence and gangs. Right now, no disrespect to Sheriff Morgan, but right now I can go to Brownsville and get any kind of drugs I want, pick up any kind of prostitute, because we're dealing, as he said, with the Band-Aid solution. We're dealing with the symptoms and not the root cause. Until we can find a way to solve these parental problems or these family problems, we're going to continue to have gangs to flourish in all our communities.
Yeah, I think we had the same father. All he had to do was act like he was mad, and that was enough to alter behavior. Jeff Gaddy, you know these kids that are coming in that are parts of gangs, you read their backgrounds, and you're looking at some cases that are kind of pathetic for supervision, aren't you?
Yeah.
And what is that? How does that factor into what you want to do with them?
Well, first of all, by the time your case comes across my desk, not only are you in a gang, but you've done something extremely serious. You've shot at somebody, you've tried to rob somebody with a gun, or you've killed somebody. So at that point, in my mind, rehabilitation or getting to the root issue is kind of out the window. I'm looking at protecting the community, at putting somebody away for as long as we can. And those are just the guys that I'm dealing with. So, but I do understand where Mr. Dogan is coming from, and I do see, when you look into these guys' backgrounds, you see that most, if not all of them, come from poor economic backgrounds, and that seems to be a root cause, that these people just all socioeconomically come from this type of background, and maybe you wonder whether or not they had a chance, but by the time they get to my desk, they've done something that's so serious that we can't really give them any leeway for that.
I see one of the indicators, excuse me just a second, I see one of the indicators for being identified as a gang member is that a parent or guardian has tipped off the sheriff's office or law enforcement that this child is a part of a gang and I'm worried about him. And I guess that just doesn't surprise me that a mom or a dad would be concerned. Do you have parents call your office and say?
We've had some parents that have asked for intervention, and again, we have some programs that we work. We have like the Law Enforcement Explorer program where we have community outreaches. But again, what frustrates me in law enforcement right now is observing, this societal shift where again, the reason why I say it comes back to poor parenting, and by that I don't mean necessarily a two-parent home or a single-parent home. It can be grandparents, because throughout my life I was very fortunate to have some very positive male role models that allowed me to stay on the straight and narrow and not go left of center. But I can also tell you that I grew up very poor in my family background, but that was never an excuse for me to, break into someone's home or to sell drugs, etc. That was unacceptable behavior. And so I was at a neighborhood watch meeting last night and received some shocking news that we were tracking some of the movements of some of the gang members. And one of the participants last night in the neighborhood watch informed me, when we talked about this very issue, about getting parents engaged, getting them to the neighborhood watch meetings, doing some intervention with the parents and the gangs, they said, well, it's some of the parents dropping some of the kids off to sell drugs.
Oh,
so we've got that dynamic now that we're dealing with. So you have the parameters of acceptable and unacceptable behavior don't exist anymore, I can tell you. Sergeant Vinson, I think, will agree with me. We try to interact with a lot of different young people in groups. The reaction that we get as law enforcement figures is 180 degrees off from the reaction that you would have received during my time, in my generation, in the reaction to law enforcement being involved, because it's one of disdain, one of disrespect. So you have some very basic nurturing issues that are not being met with children today, and we're seeing those children in the criminal justice system.
Okay, but once you find out it's a young man is involved in a gang, what can the community do you think? You can't really send a sheriff, a deputy over to the house and say, don't do this. What would work, do you guys think?
I think what we're trying to do is take even a step further back, even before they become a gang member, provide the education, and we're working on programs now where we're going to start providing the education in our community to teachers and those types, and eventually to the students. So we try to get them before they get to the age and get into a gang. Once they get into a gang and get to the age where committing the violent crime, like Jeff Gaddy's talking about, who has that kind of resources to turn that around? You're looking at a almost insurmountable problem then. So we're trying to get to it before they get into a gang. Now, some of the education we're providing is to the parents to see what to look for if their child is in a gang. If they can see that coming, maybe we can get to them just before the problem it presents itself.
Reggie Dogan, what would you tell a parent who's worried about their child being in a gang?
I would tell them to first of all, talk to your children. Find out what they're doing. Understand that the kids in Columbine, that the father drove up into the house and he saw the son building a bomb, or he could see the materials being the bomb. He just walked right by. Get engaged with the kids. Take the kids to church and get your kids involved in activities like the football, Salvation Army, Boys and Girls Club. Those kind of things help. But I got an email today from Mina Harris, Gang and Prevention Program Coordinator. You guys familiar with her? She said that they have in this state, we have a statewide plan to reduce and deter gang-related crime and violence throughout the state of Florida, and this is considered Region 1. So maybe the sheriff could talk a little bit about that. That's some kind of statewide initiative that we have. We have to find a way to solve this problem.
Yeah, something has to be done, Sheriff.
Yes, sir. That's the program that, again, the State Attorney General Bill McCullum heads up that program for the state, and we're broken up into regions. And so they have a statewide task force that are coming up with the different plans and programs for intervention. As Sergeant Vinson said earlier, though, one of the problems that we're running into is again, a funding line, a source of funding. So what we're attempting to do in Escambia County is what Mr. Dogan said. We're trying to engage the churches, engage the communities. That's why I was so supportive of Pastor Lou Timothy May in their attempt to acquire the Brownsville property, because those are the very sorts of things where when you have community leaders that step forward and say, we want to take our community back, that this condition is intolerable, that's when you turn the corner, because that's, again, is when the community partners with law enforcement, and you can see very rapid and very positive steps forward in the community, because, again, we can't hire enough deputies. I can't place one on every corner, and I can't build large enough jails to take care of this problem. If we cannot get the community buy-in and engage the community in this issue, we will certainly fail.
There might be some people who say, look, these kids are, they may be shooting at each other in their neighborhoods, but they don't come in our neighborhood and we're okay. So as they shoot each other, well, they knew what they were getting into. Is it going to, are you worried that this crime is going to bleed out into the wider community?
It has bled out. Anyone that takes that approach has got their head in the sand, and that's an unacceptable approach. And if we're not willing to protect and reach down to the least of us, then as a community, we've got severe problems. And so I can tell you that'll never be my approach. That's why we spend an inordinate amount of time in Mayfair and Montclair and Brownsville and Inslee and Myrtle Grove and those areas, because those are some of our crime-ridden areas, and we must stop the problem and assist the problem there, come up with the solutions there. Because those that think they're in a secure, safe haven enclave, they need to change that thought.
You think there's no more secure havens?
That's so true, because in that piece that was on the History Channel in Columbia, a young man who was in one gang was in a convenience store. A gang of another gang pulled up in an SUV, about 5 or 6. The young man in the convenience store came out and flashed gang signs, and the guys in the SUV was offended or insulted, or whatever the term they used. Right in front of the convenience store, a shootout occurred right there. They were shooting at each other. The young man who flashed the gang signs was killed. The guys jumped in the truck and drove away in broad daylight, a regular day convenience store. Other people were at risk, so it's like he said, you're burying your head in the sand if you don't think it's going to impact you, because you never know what bullets have no names on them.
Well, we had the incident at Sergeant Vinson. It was before I was the sheriff, but the incident over at the University Mall, or not University Mall, but the Cordova Mall.
Right.
Yeah.
Cordova Mall.
And if you look into that, and we don't know the specific person, obviously, or we would have made an arrest, but the intelligence tells us that was from one of our street level groups. And many of the people that were running from there we could identify as part of those street level groups. But then you have to look again. Over the last couple of years, we've had a homicide at Burger King, homicide at a McDonald's. How more of a public place do you have to have before you realize this is not a group hitting another group within their neighborhood? This is all of our neighborhoods. So that's why you cannot stand by and let this occur. You have to address the problem. IPTM is one of our leading educational institutes for law enforcement. Just based on their criteria, we have 5 levels of gang involvement in your community. We can identify our community in certain areas, at least at level 3 and 4, and some areas may be approaching level 5.
Level 5 being the most serious,
That's correct.
Bloods, Crips.
Well, not just necessarily the Bloods and the Crips, although we do have members of each of those groups here. We're talking just about the seriousness of our local hybrid gangs and the violent crimes that they're committing. I came back here, the sheriff moved me back into this unit in April of last year. I've lived in Escambia County all of my life, and I was as surprised as the sheriff was to find out how connected all of these crimes really are.
All right, Jeff Gaddy, we're running down here to our last few minutes. What would you say to kind of sum up your thinking about the approach to gangs?
I guess one of the things I get asked a lot when I tell people I'm the gang and gun prosecutor is, do we have a gang problem? And my response to that is, if you got a gang, you got a gang problem. And we do have gangs. It is something that we need to take seriously. It's something that the community needs to realize that we do have, and they need to take it seriously. And I think that we are doing that. The sheriff's office is doing that. The state attorney's office is doing that. And in the short time we've been doing this, we have made an impact. I went out and rode around with the gang unit one night about 2 weeks ago, and learned a lot from doing that. But had some stuff pointed out, and I really think we're on the right track.
Okay, Jeff Gaddy, the prosecutor, thank you very much. Reggie Dogan, I appreciate your input on this subject. It's a very serious topic. Sheriff Morgan, thank you for making time. Sergeant Vinson, thank you for coming in and talking about this. And we needed more time to talk about it, and maybe we'll do another program down the road. Hopefully have some progress then. Thank you for watching. I'm Lloyd Patterson for WSRE. Good evening.